Have you ever noticed how some people play with lives as if they're rearranging furniture? They speak words that shatter hearts and make decisions that ruin foundations, all while smiling as if nothing sacred just crumbled. Some carry the power to collapse a soul, not by accident, but with surgical cruelty. They don't trip into sin, they sprint into it. They don't accidentally hurt you, they intentionally orchestrate your undoing. And what makes the wound worse is not just what they did, it's the ease with which they did it. They didn't hesitate when they dismantled your confidence. They didn't blink when they chose betrayal over loyalty, deceit over honesty. And when you were left gasping for air under the rubble of their choices, they didn't reach for your hand. They walked away as if you never existed. The irony is cruel. While you struggle to heal from what they broke, they parade in peace. Your nights are haunted, theirs are silent. Your mornings begin with tremors, theirs with comfort. And yet, you have remained silent, not because you are weak, but because you trusted God to see what you couldn't fix. You surrendered the fight not out of surrender, but out of wisdom. You knew that the battle was no longer yours to carry. But here's the thing about God's justice. It never rushes, but it never forgets. The clock they thought would never strike midnight is already ticking. Their calm, borrowed. Their peace, temporary. Because when God begins to balance the scales, He doesn't need a storm. He just removes His hand. And without warning, what they built on lies begins to fall. Not slowly, not politely, but abruptly. Just like they collapsed your world with intention, God will let theirs collapse without warning. This isn't revenge. It's righteousness. It's divine order restoring itself. It's heaven saying enough. Because God is not mocked. He sees the motive behind the act, not just the act itself. He sees hearts, not just hands. And He saw how yours broke, not just that it broke. He saw who pushed. He saw who cheered. He saw who pretended. And while they thought you were alone in the collapse, they forgot you were not unseen. So if you're still sitting in the ruins of what they ruined, breathe. Don't rush to rebuild with trembling hands. Wait, watch, because the same God who allowed your fall will author their collapse, not for your vengeance, but for His justice. And when it happens, you won't need to lift a stone. You'll just stand still and see what God does with those who harm the pure with impunity. There's a different kind of pain that follows when destruction is not accidental, but intentional. It's one thing to be hurt by someone who didn't know better, who stumbled into their actions without full understanding. But it's something altogether darker when the person who caused the collapse of your world knew exactly what they were doing. They calculated it, they timed it, they executed it with the precision of someone who had rehearsed the damage long before it unfolded. That kind of pain pierces deeper, because it's not just what was done, it's the coldness with which it was done that scars the soul. They knew the trust you had in them, they knew the role they played in your heart, and still they chose to weaponize it. They made decisions not in ignorance, but in full clarity of how those decisions would wound you. That's not just betrayal. That's cruelty wrapped in pretense. And when the dust of their actions settled and left your world in pieces, they didn't look back with remorse. They looked forward, as if stepping over ruins they had every intention of creating. But here's the beauty of what they forgot. They weren't the only ones watching. There was an unseen witness to it all, God. He didn't just see what they did, He saw why they did it. And that, dear soul, is where divine justice begins. Because God doesn't respond to appearances, He responds to intentions. He weighs the heart, He measures the motive. And while humans might judge by results, God judges by what led to them. They may have justified their actions with clever words, They may have framed the narrative in their favor, painted themselves as the victim, and buried the truth under layers of half-lies. But truth has no grave deep enough to keep it hidden from God. He saw the jealousy they tried to mask with concern. He saw the bitterness they dressed up as boundaries. He saw the calculated selfishness that hid behind false tears. And most of all, he saw the delight they took in your collapse, even if they never said it aloud. You see, humans can be skilled at hiding, but no mask ever fools God. Every time they planned their step to bring you down, every silent celebration they had when you lost something, every smirk they suppressed when you were hurting, God recorded it. And while they may have thought they were clever, they were writing their own verdict with each step. This is why you don't have to seek revenge. This is why you don't need to waste your breath proving your innocence or defending your pain. The case has already been submitted in the courts of heaven, and the judge there doesn't need witnesses. He was there the whole time. He doesn't need evidence fabricated by man. He holds the original script. And just as they built your collapse with clear intention, God is preparing their collapse with divine precision. Not out of malice, but out of justice. Because the same hand that allows suffering also restores balance. The same hand that permitted your collapse will not ignore theirs when it comes, and it will come. But unlike their carefully planned attack on your peace, their fall will have no warning, no escape, no time to shield themselves. It will strike like a thief in the night. Because while they plotted, you prayed, and heaven always answers the cry of the innocent. What wounds us just as deeply as the betrayal itself is the calm detachment that often follows it. The way they walked away, not just from the situation, but from you, as if nothing sacred had been broken, as if your pain didn't matter, as if your suffering wasn't real. And the hardest part? You kept expecting them to turn around, to acknowledge, to apologize, to say something, anything that showed they still recognize your humanity. But they didn't. They walked away like a fire starter, leaving behind a burning building, never once turning to see the flames, never once checking to see who was left inside. And while you lay beneath the emotional rubble, struggling to breathe under the weight of what they caused, they went on with their lives, posting smiles, sharing joys, making memories, as if you never existed in their world. There is a specific kind of torment in being erased like that, in watching someone treat your destruction as forgettable. And yet, in their silence and absence, God remained ever present, because what they walked away from, God leaned into. What they dismissed, He documented. What they ignored, He investigated. You may not have received the apology. You may never get the truth. They might never confess to what they did or even acknowledge that it happened. But that doesn't mean your pain is invalid. Because the one who matters most, God Himself, didn't ignore it. He saw it all. Every tear that stained your pillow, every prayer you whispered in exhaustion, every time you bit your tongue when you could have lashed out. He watched, He recorded, and He remembered. And this is where divine justice becomes personal, because when someone walks away from the damage they caused without remorse, they are not just abandoning the victim. They are daring heaven to remain silent, but God does not stay silent forever. The silence you endured becomes the silence that will haunt them. Because just as they turned their back on your suffering, God will turn His back on their prosperity when the time is right. You see, God doesn't always act in the moment we expect, but He always acts with perfect timing, and the longer He waits, the more complete the collapse becomes. They may have thought their distance meant safety. They may have believed that walking away absolved them of responsibility. But in God's justice, walking away is not walking free. When God begins to move, He doesn't ask permission, He doesn't announce His arrival, and He doesn't knock on doors that were closed in pride. He enters as a righteous storm, and those who ignored the damage they caused will find themselves facing the consequences they never expected. Not because you demanded it, but because God decided it. So let them pretend nothing happened. Let them enjoy their silence. Let them keep walking unaware, because they are walking toward the edge of something they can't see. And when it hits, it won't be random. It will be righteous. Your tears weren't wasted. Your prayers weren't unheard. And your collapse was not in vain. Because God was never absent. He was gathering justice, quietly, steadily, faithfully. And while they thought their silence erased the past, God was writing the next chapter. And this time, they are the ones who won't see it coming. There's a haunting kind of pain in being wounded while someone else watches and smiles. It's a smile that doesn't bring comfort, it deepens the cut. It's the smile of someone who not only sees your suffering, but finds satisfaction in it. And when you've poured your heart into someone, given them pieces of yourself they didn't even ask for, only for them to turn around and watch you cry without flinching, that's the kind of betrayal that reaches the soul. They didn't try to console you, they didn't apologize, they didn't flinch. They smirked at your breakdowns. They maintained their joy while your heart was falling apart. Maybe they masked it with indifference. Maybe they justified their smile with a narrative they told themselves. But the truth is this: your pain didn't stop their pleasure. Your tears didn't disturb their peace. And while you wept quietly in the shadows, they celebrated their escape from accountability in the light. But heaven doesn't miss a tear. God does not overlook the soul's silent cries. He does not measure pain the way the world does. While others ignore the weeping, God collects every tear like precious pearls. In Psalm 56:8, it says, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle." That's not metaphor, that's divine record keeping. Every drop that fell from your eyes was noted, preserved and held with holy significance. While they mocked, God memorialized. And when they laughed at your heartbreak, God wasn't laughing, He was planning. When they joked about your collapse, God wasn't amused, He was listening. Because the God of justice is not just watching what they do, He's watching what they enjoy. And to enjoy another's destruction is not a passive sin, it's a declaration of character. The world may see their smiling face and believe it. They may appear kind, stable, even generous to others. But God sees behind the veil. He knows what they delighted in when no one was watching. And when someone begins to celebrate the pain they caused, they're no longer just hurting others. They're mocking the God who made them. And God doesn't forget mockery. You may not have had the words to fight back. You may not have had the strength to defend yourself in the moment. But that's not weakness. That's trust. You let God be your defender, and you chose to weep in His presence instead of warring in your own power. That's not foolish, it's faithful. And heaven honors that posture. Their smile was short-lived, their laughter shallow, because while they rejoiced in your downfall, they were writing their own collapse. And the very tears they mocked will become the weight that tilts the scale against them, not because you sought vengeance, but because God counted the tears they didn't. It's one of the hardest truths to accept. They found peace while you were in pieces. They rested while you wrestled. They moved on while you struggled to move forward. The nights they slept soundly were the same nights you cried into your pillow. and while your soul screamed for answers, their lives appeared untouched, blessed even. That gap between their comfort and your chaos felt like injustice wrapped in silence. You questioned the delay. You wondered why God didn't act immediately. You searched for meaning while trying not to lose faith. How could they live so undisturbed? You whispered. Why does it seem like they won while I'm still crawling through the aftermath? But here's the truth that breaks through the darkness. God is not rushed by your pain, but neither is he indifferent to it. He does not work on human timelines. He operates on eternity's schedule. And while time may deceive us into thinking justice is absent, it only means justice is maturing. God's justice is not emotional. It's exact. It doesn't react, it responds. And the delay you see is often the preparation you don't. While they enjoyed comfort they didn't earn, God was measuring the weight of what they did. Every peaceful moment they enjoyed was not an escape. It was a countdown, because true justice isn't just about punishing wrong. It's about timing the fall so that it leaves no room for denial. If God had acted the moment they hurt you, they might have blamed you. They might have labeled the consequences as coincidence. But when God waits, he removes all confusion. The fall becomes so clear, so aligned with their wrongdoing, that no one, not even they. This is why your chaos didn't go unseen. It went into storage. Every broken moment you endured is now part of the ledger God is balancing. And while they rested in false peace, he was preparing true justice. The kind that speaks louder than your pain. The kind that doesn't need your voice to cry out, because it carries God's own. They may have felt secure, they may have thought they escaped, but God doesn't measure time, he measures weight. And when the scales tip, it won't be gentle. It will be divine. It will be perfect. And it will remind everyone watching that God's silence was not absence, it was accuracy. They misread the silence, mistook it for safety. They believed that because no thunder rolled when they hurt you, because no lightning struck when they walked away, they were in the clear. They assumed that the absence of immediate consequence meant they were protected, and in their arrogance, they began to walk more boldly, talk more freely, hurt more carelessly. After all, they had harmed someone deeply, walked away, and nothing had happened. So they believed nothing ever. But silence from heaven is not permission. It is not protection. It is the deep breath before divine interruption. God's quiet is never void. It is preparation. While they assumed their actions were forgotten, God was doing what he always does in silence. He was setting the stage for justice. And that's the part they never saw coming. The ones who caused harm often don't fear silence. They thrive in it, because silence gives them the illusion that they've outsmarted the consequences, that they've hidden from accountability, that somehow time has covered up what conscience should have exposed. But they forget something critical. God doesn't shout when he builds justice. He whispers. He waits. He moves behind the scenes. And then, when the hour strikes, he doesn't knock. He enters, suddenly, without warning. Just as they left you in confusion and chaos without explanation, God will visit them in the stillness of their lives and unravel what they thought was untouchable. There is a moment when heaven decides, now, not a second before, not a second after. And when that moment arrives, what once felt like a stronghold becomes a trap. What once seemed like peace becomes disruption. God breaks in, not with a whisper, but with force, with clarity, with purpose. They may have thought they were safe in their silence, but it's in that very silence that God prepares his entrance. And his entry always shatters illusions. He doesn't just expose actions, he exposes the pride behind them. He doesn't just reveal the damage they caused, he reveals the character they hid. And once God breaks in, nothing remains untouched. Not the job they relied on, not the relationships they protected, not the image they curated. When God breaks silence, he breaks everything that was built on falsehood. So if they believed that time had erased their guilt, they were mistaken. If they believed that your silence was surrender, they misjudged. Because while you sat in pain, God stood in preparation. And he never stays silent forever. He only waits for the moment when his response will leave no doubt. Let them sit in their silence. Let them enjoy the illusion of safety. Because God breaks in when no one is watching, and when he does, he doesn't just correct, he reverses. He rewrites the ending they tried to control. And in the silence they once cherished, they will hear the footsteps of justice coming for everything they thought would never fall. They stepped over your ruin and built something for themselves. Not a new life, but a throne. A place where they could sit comfortably, pretending the ashes they left behind didn't belong to a soul they once claimed to care about. It was not just ignorance, it was calculated disregard. They used your collapse as a stepping stone. They saw your vulnerability as an opportunity to rise, and they told themselves, this is peace, this is healing, this is success. But anything built on brokenness without repentance isn't peace, it's pretense. God doesn't call that peace. He calls it injustice wrapped in comfort. And he doesn't bless what's built on ashes if those ashes came from cruelty, from betrayal, from manipulation. You were the foundation they broke in order to elevate themselves. You were the voice they silenced, so theirs could sound louder. And in their eyes it worked. They moved forward, found joy, built connections, they flourished. On the outside. But here's the holy truth. God doesn't build upward on rotting ground. Injustice might stand for a time, it might prosper for a season, but it cannot last. God's architecture begins with truth, with repentance, with humility. He is not a God who builds on denial. He is not a builder of fragile towers made of stolen bricks. He tears them down, piece by piece, layer by layer, until what once looked like strength is revealed for what it truly is: fraud, built on the pain of the innocent. They thought no one saw the transaction, that they could exchange your suffering for their benefit without consequence. But every benefit gained at the expense of another's soul is a seed of destruction. And God, in his mercy, may let it grow for a while, but only so it can be pulled up by the roots, completely. And when that moment comes, when their tower begins to crumble, they won't just lose what they built, they'll be forced to see why it's falling. Because God will not let a life built on lies go unchallenged. He will not allow stolen peace to last forever. Sooner or later, he restores order. Your pain was not a forgotten casualty. It was a warning flag in heaven. And while the world applauded their strength, God measured the cost. And when he begins to rebuild, he does it the right way. He restores what was broken, and he clears away what was unjustly gained, not out of spite, but out of sacred love for what is right. So let them keep building. Let them enjoy what they think is untouchable, because peace built on another's destruction is never peace at all. It is delay before collapse. And when God starts over, he starts by tearing down what should have never stood in the first place. You didn't see it coming. The betrayal, the abandonment, the coldness of someone you once called family, friend, or beloved. One moment, Life felt secure, rooted, familiar, and the next, it crumbled. Not gently, not slowly, but all at once. You collapsed beneath the weight of what they did to you, and while you were gasping for breath in the ruins, they were already walking away, brushing dust off their shoulders like nothing happened. But the collapse didn't just break you, it changed you. You learned things in that collapse. Truths about people, about pain, about resilience, and above all about God. You learned how deep the silence can be when no one understands you. You learned what it feels like to cry out and hear no echo of comfort. You learned the agony of unanswered questions, but you also learned how to stand when standing feels impossible. You discovered that strength doesn't come in applause, it comes in solitude. You found that your knees, bent in prayer, were more powerful than any sword in hand. And you realized that what they meant for destruction, God used for transformation. But they didn't learn, because they never fell, they never suffered, they never tasted what they served. So they remained proud, arrogant, blind. They mistook your silence for weakness. They assumed your prayers meant defeat, and they believed they'd never have to answer for what they caused. But God is a teacher who never skips a lesson, and what they refuse to learn through mercy, they will learn through collapse. Not a collapse brought on by man, but a divine reckoning, quiet, sharp, final. It will not come with announcement. It will not be preceded by signs. It will fall upon them as suddenly as yours did, but without the grace you received in the aftermath. Because your collapse came with God's hand beneath you, theirs will come with His hand withdrawn. Yours made you softer, wiser, stronger. Theirs will break the very ground they trusted. You learned empathy. They will learn humility. You found purpose in your pain. They will find silence in their pride. And just as they watched you fall without care, they will find no one there when they fall. Not to hurt them, but to mirror what they gave. The world teaches revenge, but God teaches reckoning. He writes stories in full, not half-written chapters. And while you felt abandoned, He was rewriting the ending, not so you could laugh, but so you could heal, so that you would know justice always arrives on time. Even if it doesn't knock, they will remember you, not in the moments of triumph, but in the silence of their undoing. And what you learned in the darkness will shine like a lamp in their storm, not because you wished it, but because divine order demands it. So if you're still carrying the weight of what they did, still wondering when the pain will end, still waiting for God to make things right, breathe. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not foolish for having loved, for having trusted, for having stayed silent when you could have shouted. God saw it all. Every motive, every moment, every mockery. And He's not finished. Their world will collapse, not because you asked for it, but because He declared it. Not out of vengeance, but because heaven does not allow injustice to thrive forever. You walked through the fire with your hands trembling, your faith cracking, your tears flowing, but you walked through it, and on the other side you found not just survival, but clarity. You became someone stronger, someone deeper, someone who knows that God sees everything. And when their time comes, when the world they built on your suffering begins to fall, they won't understand why, but you will. Because you've seen the script. You've lived the silence. You've endured the collapse, and now you will witness the justice. Quiet, sudden, unmistakable. Let them believe the silence protects them. Let them believe time has erased the truth. Let them keep walking in their comfort. Because when God moves, He doesn't announce Himself. he arrives like a thief in the night, and what they stole, he reclaims. What they built in pride, he dismantles in righteousness. What they crushed with intent, he will collapse without warning. You don't need to hope for their fall. Just stand in yours, and watch what God does with those who thought they were untouchable. The same way they collapsed your soul with intention, he will let their world collapse without a sound.